So these are the notes we're working on now. 1-7. We're talking about midpoint and distance again, but now we're not talking about it on a number line. Now we're talking about it on a coordinate plane. So that's the XY axis. The origin is in the middle. If we have to identify the coordinates of a point on the coordinate plane, we need two coordinates, right? On a number line, it has one point is a coordinate. But on a coordinate plane, it's going to have an X coordinate and a Y coordinate. Okay. So, as a refresher, this is a coordinate plane. Remember, in case you're forgotten, this is the X-Y axis, this is the Y-axis. This is the X-axis, this is the Y-axis. So, any point on this coordinate plane has a pair of coordinates, where that's an ordered pair. So, I have an X-coordinate and a Y-coordinate. They give you a point here with X coordinates, -4, -2. They give you another point, and they give you the coordinate staff. Hey, perfect timing. Thank you, sir. All right, we're just starting 1-7, Jermaine. You can go ahead and get your, you got your 1-7 notes? That one, yeah. There you go. That one is on the recordings. You're going to watch the recording for that one, okay? And you can, I'll talk to Ms. Lausman. She can help you find that. If not today, tomorrow. I think actually, who do you have 6 periods, Jermaine? Oh, I thought we had that. Okay. All right. Well, we'll worry about the 1-3 later, Jermaine. You do have to work on that, but we had to finish your test too. Okay. So now we're talking about distance and midpoint. So we talked about distance on a number line. You just have to count, right? On the coordinate plane, sometimes we can just count to find the distance. If we have a vertical line on the coordinate plane, and if we have 2 points on it, I can find the distance between point A and point B by just counting the units. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Don't do that, Jonathan. If I have a horizontal line, and I have 2 points on it, I can count the distance between point C and point D just by counting. 1, 2, 3, right? But what if you have a diagonal line? You can't just count, right? Because the distance between this point and this point at that angle is not the same distance if it's a horizontal or a vertical line. It's kind of like if you have a 12-foot ladder and a window that's 12 foot high, can you use the ladder to get in that window, in or out that window? You can't, because it's up against the wall like that, right? It will just fall out if you climb it. So if you want to get in a 12 foot high window, you need a longer ladder, right? So a longer line to get up to that 12 feet because it's got to be at an angle. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. So if you want a vertical line or a horizontal line, we can just count. But if we have one that has a slope of anything other than undefined or 0, then we have to use this distance formula. And this is the formula. I'll make it bigger for you. So it's the square root, parentheses, x subscript 2 minus x subscript 1. Remember the little numbers at the bottom? They're not mathematical, they're just labels. So they just tell us those are different numbers, different x coordinates in this case. you square that difference, and then you add that to y subscript 2 minus y subscript 1. So you square that difference. Then you have to take the square root of the whole thing, and we are going to do it the example, a couple of examples together, so at least one. You don't have to label the x and y coordinates here, but I'm going to do that today just to remind you. Remember, the first coordinate is your x coordinate, the second coordinate is your y coordinate on all ordered pairs. The first one is always your x, the second one is always your y. Remember, this ordered pair, if I start at the origin, this 3 tells me I go right 3, and that 4, positive 4 tells me I go up 4. That is the map to that point, right? So whether they gave me that ordered pair or not, I should be able to come up with those points on my own, those coordinates on my own. All right. So I'm going to show you 2 ways to do this. One way is just using the order of operations. And then I'm going to show you how to plug it in on your calculator. So if you did not get a calculator, let's go ahead and get one. Anybody not get a calculator out of the caddy? Anybody not get a calculator out of the caddy? And we do want to use that one because that's the one you can use at the end of course exam. So while you might have another great calculator, we're going to practice using these at least when we're in here. You guys have been doing a good job getting them turned back in before the end of class. I appreciate that. I still have all 30 of them right now. All right. So right now we don't need them. You're going to just set them down on the desk. First thing we're going to do, we're going to plug our x and y coordinates into the formula. So that's a required thing I need to see on your paper. Now that big long, or this is a radical or a square root symbol. So I'm going to start with parentheses and x subscript 2. It really does not matter which x you start with. The only thing, this 2 means it has to match up with this y. So this x subscript 2 has to go with this y subscript 2, right? So it does not matter first or second. That is not important. It matters that they match. So negative 4, if I use this negative 4 here for my first x spot, when I plug in the y later, I have to use its y. We'll do that in a second. So x minus the other x, close the parentheses, and an exponent of 2, we call that squared. Going to add, open your parentheses or left parentheses. Now we're doing the y. So the y that goes with negative 4 has to go first because that's in the first spot. And that's minus the y for the 3. So 3 is second, so 4 is second, and that also gets squared. So far, so good? Any questions? All right, so now we're going to simplify what's inside the parentheses. We're going to do it this way first, and then I'm going to show you exactly how to plug it in the calculator so you don't have to do all these steps if you don't want to. For some of you, this part is really simple and straightforward, and you feel comfortable with it. But for some people, it's not. And so I'm going to show you how to use the calculator. And if I show you how to use the calculator and you're comfortable with it, you can always use the calculator to check and make sure you didn't make a mistake. All right, so we're going to do parentheses. Negative 4 minus negative 3 is negative 7 squared, plus parentheses. Negative 2 minus 4 is negative 6 squared. Now I'm going to go through and I'm going to simplify some more. Negative 7 squared is positive 49, plus negative 6 squared, positive 36. So now I'm going to add them together. And in D, the distance between point W and point R is the square root of 85. And we're going to do that on my calculator. I think it winds up being 9.21 something. We're going to round to the 10th place for now. Okay? So now I want to show you how to do it on the calculator. So that's kind of a lot. And you literally can enter it almost exactly like that on the calculator and not have to do those. So your required work is going to be this and the final answer, but you have to know how to do it one way or the other. Right? You'll always get to use the calculator. So if you're comfortable with this way, try to learn the calculator way so you'll have two ways to do it. Alright, so if we're using the calculator, let's go ahead and write this in our notes. This is how you do it on the calculator. So to do it on the calculator, we're not doing the square root symbol first. The first thing we're going to do is start with this parentheses here. Parentheses 4, and then it's the positive negative button. Minus 3, close your parentheses, and then it's the X to the second button. Why don't we just write it down first, and then we'll all practice it on our calculator, okay? Let's write this down first, and then we'll all practice it on our calculator. So plus, parentheses, 2, the positive negative button, minus 4, right parentheses, X squared button, and equals. When you do that, you're going to get 85. You notice that's what's underneath the radical there. Then the next thing you have to do is hit the square root of X. And that will give you your final answer. So go ahead and write it down, and then we're going to all practice doing it. All right, did you try it, Kamara? Did it work? All right. So we start with what's under the radical, and then we'll use the radical button at the end, or that square root of X button at the end. So everybody clear it out 3 times, and let's do it together. So you hit the left parentheses, 4, positive negative button down the bottom right-hand corner there, minus 3, close your parentheses, the right parentheses, that's X squared. Now you should see 49, positive 49. Is everybody positive 49? Now it's plus, left parentheses, negative 2. Remember, negative 2 on here, you have to hit 2, then the positive negative button, minus 4, right parentheses, and now X squared. What'd you get? 36. Now hit the equal button. Did you get 85? Alright, so clear it out. Left parentheses. 4 negative button, minus 3. Close your parentheses. Now it's the X squared button. The X squared button right there. Now plus. So it's your left parentheses down. Now the positive negative button. Minus, yep. Close your parentheses. That's the X squared button again. Ah, see what you got? Now the X underneath that on the calculator. Now hit that button. Ta-da! 9.2. Anybody need help getting there? Anybody else have a question on how you do on the calculator? So if you're doing it on the calculator, you got to give me that first step in the answer. Okay. All right. So negative 4 is going to do that left parentheses first. And we're going to do negative 4 because that's our first number, right? And when we do that, it's 4 and the negative button. Now it's minus 3. And it's your right parentheses. Now your X squared button. Up. Now left parentheses. And it's negative 2, so it's 2 and the negative button again. minus 4, close your parentheses, x squared again, and equals. Now, the last step is this button. Put it into square root. Ta-da! And so the answer is 9.2. We're going to round to 9.2. The 10th place. Alright? Alright, anybody have a question on that? Okay, we're going to move on. So we're going to find this distance. So we're going to go ahead. The first thing is required that you show me how to plug it in the formula. Big, long square root symbol. So it's going to be a different squared plus a different squared. So basically a subtraction problem squared plus a subtraction problem squared. So looking back at your formula, you guys can look on your page. So the x's go in the first group, the y's go in the second group. It's just like in the ordered pair, right? The x's are first in the ordered pair, the y's are first in the, or second. Honestly, it wouldn't matter, but that's how we're going to do it. So x's, this is an x and this is an x. So negative 4 minus 2. Now the y that goes with this negative 4 is 1, so it's going to be 1 minus the other y. So that is how you plug in. X coordinate minus x coordinate plus y coordinate minus y coordinate. And each of those are squared. So far, so good? So the formula is the coordinate minus the coordinate, right? So let's make sure I get it right. So the x coordinate is negative 4 minus 2, right? The y coordinate is 1 minus 0. Make sense? Okay. So now here's where we can just do it on the calculator. Jaden? Yes. Here's where we can just do it on the calculator. So that's what I'm going to do with you now. So we're going to start here, parentheses, 4 positive negative minus 2, and then the x squared button, plus left parentheses, 1 minus 0, close your parentheses, and then the x squared button, then equals. Caleb, are you writing this? So this is the calculator method. If you're comfortable doing it without the calculator at this point, I don't think you need my help here. But I definitely, if you want to do it that way and you have a question, raise your hand, I'll answer it. I'm really trying to teach you guys to get the most out of this calculator before we get to the end of course exam to get some silly mistakes. I don't know yet, what'd you get when you hit equals? You got 37? What'd you get, Ethan? What'd you get, Caleb? Did you do it yet? 37? I think you're right. Now you're going to hit the square root of x. What'd you get? 6.08. So we're going to round that to the 10th place. So if it's 6.08, what do we round it to? 6.1, right? So it's 6.08 ... and we're rounding it to here, where that rounds to 6.1. Because this number is 5 or greater. Make sense? Alright. So let's go on. The other part is a little bit more complicated. You guys good? Jermaine, you good? Okay. So now we have to be able to find the midpoint on here. And there's a different formula for that. It's a little wonkier. So we're not finding the length from one endpoint to the midpoint. We're actually finding the ordered pair for the point that's exactly between W and R. So this is the formula. So it's going to be the x coordinate of the midpoint, the y coordinate of the midpoint. That's what we're looking for. So this is going to give us this is going to give us the x coordinate of the midpoint. This is going to give us the y coordinate of the midpoint. You guys caught up with me? Okay. So, W and R are endpoints. And they've already got the endpoint marked, right? But what we're doing, we could find the coordinates by looking at that point, right? But we need to use the formula because they're not always going to give us that point. So we find the midpoint of segment WR, the segment drawn between this point and this point on the coordinate plane. We're going to use this formula. So, we're going to go ahead and start with this formula. I'm just going to use M for midpoint. So the x coordinate, so x and x, so this is the x, and this is the x, right? So we're going to add those. And then we're going to divide by 2. Similar to when we were finding the midpoint, we wanted to find the midpoint of something we know the distance to. We take the distance and we divide it by 2, right? So this is the x coordinate for the midpoint once we simplify it. Now, the y coordinates are going to go here. -2 plus 4 all over 2. So now we're going to simplify each of those. So the midpoint is -4 divided by 3. That's -1 over 2. -2 plus 4 is 2 over 2. And we're actually going to bring that down one more time and simplify it. This one is simplified. Now this one is simplified. What do you think? Is that hard? So this one, none of it's hard. The next thing we're going to do is a little bit more complex. So we're going to use this formula a little different way. So Kamar's asking if you turn it into a decimal. Typically, if you don't have a decimal there, I don't want a decimal in the answer. Let's say you have a decimal. I'm going to show you to switch it back to a fraction, okay? So you have 0.5 negative. If you hit the seconds. All right, so if you want to know how to turn a decimal, so technically if you don't have a decimal in the problem, I don't want a decimal in the answer unless it's a word problem. So let's say you did it as a decimal. That's okay. Now you can use your calculator. You're going to use the second button, and then you're going to use this left arrow. Everybody go and do that in your calculator. Clear your calculator out 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Now enter 0.5 in the negative button. Now hit second and that arrow button at the bottom left. When you do, it's going to look like this. And you have to know that that's -1/2. That make sense, Maya? Wendy, that's good? Okay. All right, we're moving on. You guys ready? We're going to find the midpoint here. So the midpoint is, we're going to do this one fast because we still have another one that's a little bit more complex. So I'm going to kind of do this one fast. So it's x plus x, -1 plus 6 divided by 2. And then y plus y, that's 2 plus 1 over 2. X plus x over 2, y plus y over 2. That make sense? So now does that make sense? Okay. So now let's simplify them. So the midpoint is actually -1 plus 6 is 5/2, plus 2 plus 1 is 3/2. So that, oh, not plus. So no, not plus. Comma there. It's an ordered pair. So if we start at the origin, we go 5 halves. 5 halves is 2 1/2, so over 1, 2 1/2. And then up 3 halves, that's 1 1/2, up 1 1/2. And you'll see we would get to point M. All right, any questions? You good, Jermaine? You good, Tyrone? Okay. All right, so this one, now we're going to use this formula a little bit different way. I don't know why we don't actually have another spot for notes, but we're going to find the missing endpoint. And when we do that, we have to use the x-coordinate and the y-coordinate separately. So back here, this is the formula for the x-coordinate, right? So this equals xm. Does that make sense? This goes with xm, and this goes with ym, or the y-coordinate of the midpoint. Does that make sense, Olivia? All right, so we're going to separate this and use it that way. So here, we're going to start with that formula. The x-coordinate of the endpoint equals the x's, the sum of the x's divided by 2. The formula for the y-coordinate is going to be the y-coordinate of the midpoint equals the sum of the y divided by 2. But the trick is, we don't know one of the y's. We know the coordinate for the midpoint, but we don't know the endpoint. So let's draw ourselves a picture here. So we have a diagram to work from. It says find the missing endpoint of AC. So we know that this is A, and we know this is C, and it tells us that B is the midpoint. So we're going to mark them congruent. That means AB and BC have the same measure. That means B is the middle of that segment. So now we're going to use this formula to find the x-coordinate. So the coordinate, let's go ahead and write the coordinates here. This is 2, 8. This is negative 2, 2. And this is what we don't know. So we're looking for an x and a y here. Make sense, Valentina? Does it make sense, Tyrone? Okay. So now I'm going to plug in what I do know and solve for what I don't know. So I do know the x-coordinate for the midpoint. The x-coordinate for the midpoint is right here. So the x-coordinate for the midpoint is negative 2. Does that make sense, students? And it's equal to the sum of the x's. Well, here's an x. So it's 2 plus, but here's the other x. I don't know what it is. So I'm just going to use x for that unknown x. And it's always divided by 2. Any questions about how we got here? Does that make sense? And now we're going to solve. So if this is divided by 2, we're always going to multiply both sides by 2, and it's always going to get rid of that bottom 2. So now we have negative 2 equals 2 plus x. I'm squeezing mine in. So we're going to subtract 2 from both sides. And now we know that the x-coordinate that we're missing is negative 4. So that is the x-coordinate here. What do you think? Say it again. How did I get what? Let me make that equation a little bit bigger. I squeezed it in there. So let's do this again. I'm going to write it down here, but then I'll erase it. All right, so 1 multiplied by both sides by 2. Those cancel, but now I have negative 4 equals 2 plus x. Does that make sense? And now we subtract 2 from both sides. Oh, you're right, it's -6, thank you. What happens when I try to squeeze in? Probably when you try to squeeze in as well. Good job, Lindy. I am gonna make mistakes. It's much less confusing if you guys help me fix them before we get too far. All right, so that's the x coordinate, not -4. Make sense, Dad? All right. So now we're going to do the same thing with the y's here. So the coordinate, the y coordinate of the midpoint goes here. The y coordinate of the midpoint is here. So this is the y coordinate of the midpoint. So that's going to go here. So now we have 2 equals the y coordinate of the point we have at 4 plus the y coordinate that we don't know. We're just going to use y for it, and it's always divided by 2. Does that make sense, Brandon? Now we're going to solve that equation. We'll multiply both sides by 2. I'm going to work mine down here so I don't make the same mistake again. So these simplify, and I have 8 plus y. Did I get it right this time, Lindy? Looks good so far? All right, great. So now I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides, and y is -4. So the answer is this right here. That is your solution. That is the answer to your question. What are the coordinates of that other endpoint? Make sense, Ethan? You guys caught up with me? All right, we're going to go down. I'm going to leave that. Are you down? Is he right down here? Okay. All right, I'm going to just go down below that. So for finding the missing endpoint of this one, I'm going to draw another line. Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and erase this so it's not confusing. It's already confusing enough when I make a mistake. Let's get that out of the way. Okay. So now I'm going to do another segment AC. They're giving me the midpoint again. I'm going to indicate it's the midpoint by marking those things congruent. So even if I don't have it exactly in the middle, the fact that I said they're congruent indicates it's a midpoint. I'm going to go ahead and put my ordered pairs with the points on the number line here. Well, not really number line, just the segment. And now C is what I don't know. So remember using that the coordinate of the midpoint, the x coordinate of the midpoint here. So that was the x subscript m we used in that formula up above, equals the x coordinates that we have plus the x coordinate that we don't have divided by 2. Yeah. Everybody understand how we got there? The formula is up above there. I didn't recopy it. Anybody have any questions about how we got that? It's always the, so if we're finding the x coordinate of our endpoint here, if we're looking for x here, then we use the x from the midpoint. Yes, so the formula is the x coordinate of the midpoint. That's what that means. So x with the little subscript m means that's the -2 would be the x coordinate of that. Okay? Yay! Okay. So now we're going to go, I'm going to leave it up there so you can see that formula all in one. So now always multiply both sides by 2. So we've got -4 equals -5 plus x. And add 5 to both sides. And now I know that the x coordinate of C is +1. Can anybody tell me what to do to find the y coordinate? Anybody doing, Kamara? Yep. What is that? Perfect. Now what do I do? So we did the x's, right? So these are the y's, and you might want to make yourself a little note over here just to remind you what you're doing. Okay, now what? What's y1? Looking at the y's, right? So remember, that's why I put it down here to kind of help you keep the points straight. 7, yes. And it was pluses or minuses. And what are we adding it to? Y, right? The y, that's what we don't know, right? We're looking for this y coordinate. So this is, go back up here and look at this formula. The y coordinate of the midpoint is equal to both of the y's divided by 2. We don't know this second y, but we do know the first y, right? So the first y is 7. The second y we don't know. So when we don't know a number in algebra, you use a variable for that. So it makes sense to use a y there. So then it's always divided by 2. Does that make sense, Tyron? All right, and now we always multiply this by 2 to solve for this one, see? So now we'll get 2 equals 7 plus x. Subtract 7 from both sides, and now not x, it's y. Thank you so much. And so it's negative 5 equals y. So my ordered pair for the other endpoint is 1, negative 5. And it's only an ordered pair if it has parentheses around it and a comma separating the x and y coordinates. So don't forget your parentheses. If you forget your parentheses on a test, then you lose points. So I won't count the whole thing wrong, but it's technically not a pair of coordinates, set of coordinates if you don't have the parentheses and if you don't have a comma in between the x and y. Whew, what do you think? All right, so we don't have much time, but you do have about 7 minutes you can work before the lunch bell rings. So let's work on either your 1-3 if you haven't finished it, or your 1-7 it doesn't matter, it's up to you. If you want to go ahead and finish your 1-3, so you can get that turned in, and then you only have to do the 1-7 tonight, so that's not a bad idea. I am, remember, extending the due dates in the 1-3 since there was no sound on the video.